Your source for everything paranormal. Parax.
Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. By now, you should realize that we're the only show where we speak to all the guests that are on the other side of the veil. And we are brought to you every week on Sundays by the Parax Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I will be doing the channeling tonight.
And I am Connie Strohm, your co-host, and I would like to thank you all for tuning into our show this evening. Tonight, we'll be talking to Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States. We have some very interesting questions concerning the Watergate break-in for him. We have prepared questions, as always, but again, as always, we do welcome questions from the chat room, and I always try to get in as many as I can.
Okay, and we always try to give a small disclaimer when we begin because no idea how the spirit guests are going to answer. And I guarantee you there will be people that will not be real happy with some of the answers tonight. So anyway, the opinions and statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect our opinion, those of the Parax Network, or those of our sponsors.
If you've listened to our show, you know that Channeling History is very different from other shows. Not only are all of our guests on the other side of the veil, they're all souls who have contributed to historic events or other holy spirits and archangels. Last week, we interviewed the spirit of Robert E. Lee, the commander of the Southern forces in the Civil War. He spoke of not only the war, but of the institution of slavery in the South. If you missed it, the show's available on our YouTube channel.
Okay, on our future shows, we'd like to interview spirits as recommended by our listeners. So please submit some questions for future shows or questions for the spirit guests to our email, channelinghistoryoonparax@gmail.com. If you listen to our show, you also know that we always say a prayer of protection. There's evil out there. We want to make sure when we open this channel that we've got all the protections available to us. So Connie will now say the prayer, and we will begin to speak with our guests tonight.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen. Okay, President Nixon, thank you so much for joining us this evening, as well as Mrs. Nixon. She's also honoring us. Mr. President, would you like to begin with a message?
Yes, I would. I always enjoyed speaking to the people, and it's something I miss now that I'm on the other side. So I thank you for the opportunity. I always tried to do the best for our country. Perhaps I looked at some things the way I shouldn't have looked at them, and I did some things that I shouldn't have done. But I think everybody does things that they look back, they wish they hadn't done. Of course, not many of them look back and see that what they did caused them to lose the presidency of the United States. So I think I'm pretty unique in that situation. But as I said, I always tried to do what I thought was best for the country. It was a very difficult time. Now, you're also living in a very difficult time now. But when I took over, we were in the throes of the Cold War. China was blockaded away from us. Vietnam was just a terrible, terrible quagmire. We were losing many of our boys over there. So my times are pretty difficult. I made some good decisions, as I said, and I made some bad decisions. So, Connie, if you want to ask some more questions, I'm ready.
As a matter of fact, I do, sir. Your family was Quaker. How did that affect your political career?
My whole family was Quaker, and I tried to follow religion as well. As you know, they were very strict Christians, and they were very anti-war. Part of what I ran on when I was in my first presidential election was that I wanted to end the war. I realized that we were making many mistakes, and I realized it was a war we couldn't win. But the question was, how did my religion affect us? I've always believed in God, and believe it or not, I actually prayed to him for guidance in many of these instances. When you're truly involved in the presidency of the United States, you often find it's very hard to follow many of your religious convictions. I probably would have been better off if I would listen a little closer to not being supposed to tell any mistruths. If I would have lived up to my religion, I would have taken responsibility for the break-in when it happened. I must say that I drew away from my faith when I was president, but I always said is that I tried to do what was best for the country.
You were offered a tuition grant to attend Harvard University, but turned it down. Why was that?
My family was very poor, and they needed me at home to work on the farm and try to help them make ends meet. Yes, I was accepted at Harvard, but it was just not the right time for me. My family needed me. I loved my family, and I thought I would do the best for them, so I turned it down.
After you graduated from Duke Law School, you applied to join the FBI. Why did you want to join the FBI?
I thought that it would be a very, very interesting job. I wanted to serve the country. I obviously was a Quaker, so I drew away from, at that time, thinking that I would join the armed forces. I thought the FBI would be a good place for a young lawyer to learn and gain experience. J. Edgar Hoover had a good reputation, and I just felt that the FBI would be a great opportunity. I always wanted public service, and I felt that by joining them that it would work, but I wrote to them, applied, and never received an answer. I later found out that I had actually been accepted into the FBI, but they were doing cuts in payroll, so they never sent me the letter.
You worked for several years as a practicing attorney. How did that help you in your political career?
I gained a lot of experience. Again, I met a lot of people. I always felt when I was working that I wanted to perhaps run for political office. It was always in the back of my mind. During high school, I tried to be class president. In college, I had joined many organizations and tried leadership roles in them. I thought that by trying to gain as much influence with others as possible through working as an attorney, that it would open the door for what I wanted to do in the future.
Okay, and why did you leave public practice and move to Washington, D.C., accepting a job at the Office of Price Administration?
It wasn't a great job, but I also knew that Washington, D.C. was the center of power. I felt that the job at the Office of Price Administration would help me to gain knowledge of how the government worked. It would help me meet people, and I thought it would be a good way to try to work myself into some sort of a political position.
Even though you were a Quaker and exempt from military service, you applied to join the United States Navy and requested sea duty during the Second World War. Why was that?
I wanted to serve our country. I wanted to find out what it was like to be in a position of understanding how war's work. I did manage to go to sea, but I was in an administrative role and I never did get to see combat. But I did truly serve the Navy, and I'm very proud that I did it.
Okay, in 1946, you were elected to Congress. Why did you choose that time to start a political career? What encouraged you?
It was the end of the war. Things were in terrible shape in our country, to be honest. Inflation was rampant. All the boys were coming back. There was unemployment. There wasn't enough jobs. I was not approving of the way that Truman was running the country at the time, and I felt that I would try to take an active role. So I made some connections and managed to be chosen to be allowed to run for Congress. I was successful, and that was the start of my political career.
Okay, could you expand on your opinion of J. Edgar Hoover?
When you're on the outside looking in, you realize that you thought that Hoover was an incredibly effective person. I felt that there was more that he could do with some of the people that were communist sympathizers in our government. Once I gained high elective office, I understood that there were times that Hoover was exceeding the congressional powers that were given to him. But I think all in all that he was a pretty good director.
Okay. After the end of World War II, just how prevalent were communist sympathizers in our government?
Keep in mind that before World War II, there were communist organizations everywhere in the country. There were huge conventions that were even held in New York City. After the war, and also keep in mind that during the war, we were fighting with them against the Nazis. After the war, things changed. Stalin was trying to gain power. He was bumping heads with us. He was racing with us to get people into space, and he did with Sputnik. All of a sudden, we were in a race with the communists. We felt that many of the people that had favored them in the past were still favored them. It was a time that being anti-communist was the place to be, and there were those in Congress that exaggerated the threat. There were some spies, there was no doubt about that, and there were people that were giving information from our country, but it was never as bad as many of the politicians made out.
My goodness, politicians putting something out that's not truthful. Imagine that. What was your opinion of Joseph McCarthy?
I tried to remain friendly with Joe, but I thought that he was carrying things to extremes. He was making a lot of enemies, but he was also making a lot of headlines. Joe was a very complex individual. I think in the long run that he actually did a lot more harm than he was doing good, but he did truly bring the attention of the American people to the problem of communists being in our government. But I think that he also had problems. I think a lot of innocent people were drug into it. People were named that weren't communism, and he ruined a lot of lives.
Okay, you criticized Harry Truman's handling of the Korean War. What would you have done differently?
I would have handled things a bit differently. I would have not removed General MacArthur. He was very popular with the people of the country. He did a lot to bring confidence. A lot of people had a lot of faith in him. When Harry fired him, he made in my mind, he made a very serious mistake. I would have been more aggressive. When the Chinese entered the war, I would have been more aggressive in letting our troops drive them back. If it would have been necessary, I would have bombed Chinese supply routes. Harry essentially decided on allowing a stalemate. And as you can see, we still have huge problems with North Korea. I would have been much more aggressive in pursuing the war.
Okay, in 1952, you were selected as the vice president nominee under Dwight Eisenhower. How were you selected to run for vice president?
Well, there were a lot of people that were interested in running for vice president under Eisenhower. Everybody knew how popular Ike was after the war, and it was a good position to be into. I was essentially a compromise candidate, and I was somebody that Dwight didn't object to, and that's basically how I got picked.
Okay. Tell us about your dog Checkers speech.
The newspapers were running stories about a political group that had been formed that was supporting my political candidacies. They were contributing to what I was trying to do. They were saying that I was using the funds in that political group illegally. I made a speech telling them that I was telling the American people that I was not, that I was being basically framed. And I pointed out just how little money I really had. I upset Pat a bit because I talked about her having to wear a cloth coat. But I laid out basically that we did not have a lot of money at that time. And I even said that somebody made a gift of my daughter's dog, and his name was Checkers. And all of a sudden, everybody started referring to it as the Checkers speech.
Okay, getting back to Pat and the cloth coat. Did she really only wear a cloth coat?
Well, in the fall. She wore heavier coats in the winter. But
glad to hear that.
but yes, Pat was always very conservative in her dress. She's a beautiful, wonderful woman. I still see a lot of her over here. And yes, there were many, many times that she wore a cloth coat.
How large a role did you play in the Eisenhower administration as vice president?
I was given increased responsibilities with different matters. But Ike never really allowed me to get into his inner circle. He had a very close group of advisors that he trusted. I guess it was from all the secrecy that he had done in the military. But I never really got that close to him that I became one of his, an advisor as close to many of those that had served with him.
Well, other than that, how did you get along with him?
Other than that, I got along very well. And as I say, he did expand the responsibilities of the vice presidency. Up until his administration, vice presidents really didn't do much. He did allow me to travel to countries, to speak with countries' leaders. I got to give him credit. It was really the first time that the vice presidents of the country had a very expanded role.
Why did Eisenhower consider dropping you from the ticket when he ran for his second term?
He was afraid that I was going to not help him a whole lot in his popularity. There were some of his advisors that did dislike me. They realized that I had a very strong personality and that I was trying to become more aggressive in my roles. And his advisors were supporting others to replace me on the ticket. They felt that at that time, they needed support from other areas of the country. And in those days, they felt that the vice president would bring votes from the states in which he was from. So there were numerous reasons, but when Eisenhower saw that my little Checkers speech had done very well, that he agreed to allow me to remain on the ticket.
What did you learn from the first televised presidential debate with Jack Kennedy?
Well, I learned a lot. I learned that appearance is everything. We were used to using radios in those days, and this was the first time the people could really see the candidates. Jack was a very good-looking guy. He was all dressed up and had his makeup on and looked very good on the television. I looked like I hadn't shaved that day and a bit disheveled. I still think that I verbally won the debate, but the people obviously thought a lot more of Kennedy's appearance than of the words that I used to debate him.
Okay. We have a very lengthy question here from one of our listeners. I will try to get to most of it here. Did Henry Kissinger talk to you about staying in Vietnam for 3 more years to save face? And why was the U.S. in Vietnam?
Well, obviously the United States was in Vietnam to try to stop the spread of communism. Henry was reluctant for us to withdraw. We had such a terrible time. We had heavy losses. We had a lot of blood and treasure in Vietnam. We had lost a lot of men, and the United States was going to look like a loser if we pulled out. So yes, Henry was opposed to what I really wanted to do there.
Okay. Get back to my regular questions here. In 1960, first of all, do you see Jack Kennedy now that you're on the other side?
Yes, absolutely. We're actually fairly good friends over here.
Good. In 1960, you ran against him and lost by only around 113,000 votes. There were allegations of voter fraud in Texas and Illinois, but you refused to contest the election. Why?
I actually didn't contest it because it was very troubled times for our country. Vietnam was tearing our country apart. There were so many people. They were treating our soldiers badly when they returned. There was an incredible amount of hatred that had been started over the Vietnam War. And there were many political differences. I realized that that there probably was voter fraud, but I simply did not do it because I did not want to cause any more upheaval in the country.
Did you think there was any possibility that you had actually won the election?
Yes, I actually thought I probably did win the election. But as you're seeing today, voter fraud, it's still very prevalent. Actually, it's more prevalent than it was in my day. Today, you have better means of trying to check it out. But, as I said, I did not want to cause any more dissension in a very troubled country.
Okay. In 1964, you refused to run against Lyndon Johnson. Why did you refuse?
Well, for one reason, I didn't feel that I could beat him. I was very disheartened at that point about politics, and I really felt that I didn't want to have another defeat.
Did you ever suspect that Lyndon Johnson had a role in the Kennedy assassination?
I had actually heard rumors about that, but it was very hush-hush. The people did not really want to speak about it at a high level. But yes, I had heard the rumors, but it was not until I arrived over on this side that I confirmed that what I had heard was true.
Okay. What was your opinion of print journalists?
I hated them. The journalists have always seemed to oppose the Republican Party. And in my day, it wasn't any different. Keep in mind that Roosevelt had just been elected to 4 terms, and all the journalists did during that whole time was basically kiss his butt. They were very difficult. They would twist the words that I would speak. Now, maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been sometimes. But I just thought they were very unfair. I felt that we had a better chance with journalists from television. I felt that it would be harder to lie to the people if they were seeing what was taking place. Print journalists basically can do pretty much whatever they want to do. They can make things up. They're protected. First Amendment gives them incredible freedoms that they can use for good or bad. If you look around today, you're going to find out that many of the newspapers are almost streaming propaganda. Now, that can happen on both sides. I'm not saying that it's just a democratic thing. But if you looked at what happened, if you look at what happened to our last president, the newspapers were very, very much against him. And as you're now finding out, some of the stories that they did were lies. I mean, the whole Russian thing, you're going to find out that there was absolutely no truth involved with that. Now, I'm not saying that I thought he was a great president, but I am saying that the press did not treat him fairly.
One of your major accomplishments was improved relations with China. What is your opinion of China today?
I was trying to avoid having China as an armed enemy that we had to worry a lot from. I thought that it would be best for the world if we opened trade with them. I sent my ambassadors to them in privacy, and I went over and I was the first to meet with Mao in person. I did as much as I could to try to bring China into the modern world. Now today, China has become one of our biggest adversaries. They are attempting to be leaders of the world. Obviously, in my time, I had no concept of where things would be going, 50, 60 years later. Today, China is undoubtedly one of the largest dangers that the country is going to have to face into the future. They are going to do their best. We are being very stupid in relying upon them for all those imports. The Chinese people are incredibly clever and brilliant. They know what it is to do long-term planning. They're laying plans 20, 30 years into the future where they want to be. And our leaders had better be strong enough to determine what they're going to try to do and stop them. I don't think the United States would do well as a communist country.
One of your agreements with China was that Taiwan was part of China. Today we're facing the possibility that China will attack Taiwan and draw us into another war. Were you wrong in this assessment, and what do you currently see as the future for Taiwan?
I wasn't wrong in the assessment at the time. Keep in mind that history changes many things. I could not foresee that China would become such an important goal that Taiwan would become such an important goal for China. Mao said that it was natural. He also had given me private assurances that he was not going to attack them or do anything stupid. So, in the interest of getting an agreement, I said that Taiwan was a part of the original part of China, which is absolutely historically correct. Things have changed much through the years. As China has gained in strength, they have made Taiwan a symbol of what they need to have to accomplish their future ambitions and goals. We have felt that it was strategically important not to let them take Taiwan. I don't think the Chinese will take a chance on open conflict with the United States over Taiwan. I hope that calmer heads will prevail, and I hope that they're going to see how the world has ganged up on Russia for this stupid war that they've started. So Taiwan is going to continue to be a problem. It will be interesting to see how the next leader of China looks at the Taiwan situations. Okay, Connie, let's take a little break here, and we will be back in a couple minutes.
We'll return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock. The Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hi, this is Marla Brooks from Stirring the Cauldron. Thursdays are a great night on the Para-X Radio Network. We start off the evening with Journey into the Light, Chapter 3, with your hosts, Psychic Little T and Tabby Cat Gash at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then, on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 8 p.m., it's Tango and Friends, hosted by Bruce Tango. And on the alternate Thursdays at 8 p.m., tune in to Stirring the Cauldron, the archive podcast. Every week at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me on Stirring the Cauldron Live. And then at 10 p.m., stick around for New Aeon Now with Lily Alley, Davron Michaels, and Christine Matza. Finally, to round out the night, join Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz on the Paranormal Encounters podcast. All this every Thursday, right here on Para-X.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Connie?
Okay, Mr. President, our listeners are full of questions tonight. I'm going to try to get in as much as I can. One quick question. Did you really show Jackie Gleason an alien body?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, and you were talking about the press not being too honest. Would you, from over there and what you saw, was the Putin-Trump thing as bad as the press was saying it was?
No. It was based on a bunch of lies. Now, I'm not saying that Trump handled Putin in the proper manner. I think that Trump probably trusted Putin far too far, but all of the information that was brought out was not true.
Okay, when you became president, America was losing around 300 soldiers a week in Vietnam. Why did you decide the war was unwinnable?
I felt that if we expanded the war beyond Cambodia and Laos, and went after the supply routes from China, we would be involved in another world war, and I really wanted no parts of that. It was a very, very difficult situation. The Vietnamese were incredible fighters. Nobody gave them credit. They were very effective, and they knew the terrain much better than we ever did. I just thought there were so many circumstances going on. I did follow some advice, and we did additional bombing. We tried to hit their supply routes in Cambodia, and we couldn't stop it. the country, the terrain, the jungle, everything was against us over there. It was a terrible place to fight. I realized coming in that it was unwinnable. We tried to do some things. We actually, instead of pulling out, we actually did extend the war for a bit. But I came to the conclusion that it was just a total waste of time.
Okay, when you withdrew our troops from Vietnam, did you know that North Vietnam would take over the whole country?
Yes, I knew there was going to be no way to stop them. If the United States couldn't stop them, certainly the army of South Korea couldn't.
Okay, another question out of the chat room. This one's super important. You must give us the full answer for this. Why did you go and laugh in?
For political reasons. I got a huge boost from that little cameo on Laugh-In. I should have spent more time there.
What was your opinion of the Jewish people?
I was never anti-Semitic, but I felt that there were many times that the Jewish people could not be trusted. I tried to remain neutral with them. The Yom Kippur War was something I was not expecting. It put the United States in a difficult position because we were allies of Israel and we were guaranteeing their security. I always understood that we had to preserve the country of Israel, but there were times that their leaders were only interested in their best interest. And I just thought there were many problems with our relationship.
Okay, at that time, our military had a DEFCON 3 placed on them, which is actually an alert for nuclear war. How close were we to a nuclear war?
We weren't that close. I wanted Brezhnev to understand that I was going to back Israel with whatever we had to do. When I put the military on DEFCON 3, Brezhnev backed off. He had to know that I was really serious.
Yeah. When you took office in 1969, what was your major economic goal?
I was trying to increase employment. Inflation was at a very, very high level. Interest rates, we tried to do many things. A lot of the problems were based on the fact that we were spending too much in Vietnam. It was just a very different economical time. I tried to cut back my spending, but we were being drained by the war. I knew that we had to control the inflation rate, and I did all that I could to bring the inflation down. Today, you're faced with a terrible inflation rate, and I'm not seeing much action in trying to truly curtail it. In my opinion, the Fed has acted incredibly slow at raising interest rates. I'm sure that the fact that they need to raise interest rates in an election year have nothing to do with it.
Would you have any other advice for them to get rid of this high inflation?
They've got to cut this spending. Government has grown to such a multi-headed monster that nobody can control it anymore. There are many agencies that overlap in authorities. Somebody needs to take control, and presidents on both sides have just made it worse. An individual has to come in that brings reduced spending. You need balanced budgets at this time. You need to get the inflation under control. And you just simply need to run the government like you would run your personal life.
Good advice. Alger Hiss was accused of spying for the Soviet Union. Was he guilty?
At the time, I thought he was. But now that I'm over here, I realize he wasn't.
In July 1969, we won the space race by having Apollo 11 land on the moon. Was any part of the moon landing faked, like some people have said?
We may have exaggerated a few things. The boys did land on the moon. There were some things that the people were obviously not told about on the moon landing. We did observe aliens, and that was kept a deep, dark secret. But we were there, and we beat them. We beat Russia.
Okay, we have another question out of the chat room about Henry Kissinger. As your Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, was he loyal to the United States, or was he part of the so-called Majestic 12?
No, I always considered Henry very loyal. Now that I'm over the side and I've watched him, Henry cared about the United States. He wasn't always right in his opinions, but he was I truly believe he's a patriot.
Was there such a thing as a Majestic 12?
Well, there's certainly a one world order. There's absolutely no way to deny that. Many of the leaders care more about what the other individuals in the order care about them than what they care about how they handle the people. One thing that the citizens of the United States should do in the future is to realize the candidates that truly are looking out for the people. It's not hard to understand which ones are more interested in this being friends with all the other members of the one world order. It is time that the United States has to really understand that some people care about the people and some could care less. They need to determine that and put people in office that will do their best for them.
You're actually saying the same thing God has told us. Another quick question out of the chat. Who was behind Robert Kennedy's assassination?
Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, another one. Okay, in November 1972, you were elected by a huge majority as you defeated George McGovern. Did the Republican Party participate in any dirty tricks such as bugging offices, harassment of activist groups, or any other activity to sabotage Democrats?
Yes, actually they did. I told my people that I didn't want them to let me know what was going on, but that I thought that it was very important to fight fire with fire. Sadly, some of my people got carried away, and that is eventually what led to my downfall.
Okay. What role did G. Gordon Liddy play in your administration?
Liddy was one of the guys that was apparently one of the Republican Party fixers. Liddy was ex-CIA. He did a lot of things that he should not have done. He played not a large role in the political part of our administration, but some of the people in our administration placed much too much trust in him in trying to find information on the other Democratic candidates.
Okay. Why did you allow people like Liddy and Howard Hunt in your administration?
I felt that the Democrats were doing dirty tricks against us, and I wanted to be doing the same against them. I underestimated what these people were capable of. My advisors never told me a lot of what was taking place, and I think that they thought that they were doing what I wanted them to do. They should have had much more strict limits put upon them.
Did you have any advanced notice of the Watergate break-in?
I did not. I absolutely did not know in advance of Watergate.
3 days after the break-in, you had a conversation with H.R. Heinemann, your chief of staff, that was recorded on tape. Why did the White House tape of your conversation have an 18.5-minute gap in it? And what information was on that tape, that gap?
Haldeman was telling me about what was taking place. When all hell broke loose over it, I realized that some of the information on that tape was going to be very damning. I should have never destroyed that tape. I did not know about it in advance, I did not participate in it, and I did not approve of it. But when I tried to cover it up, I committed a crime. I should have never done it. At the time, those around me thought they were protecting me. It was one of the major mistakes of my lifetime.
Did you actually order the erasing of that portion of the tape?
I may have hinted that it would be better if parts of that tape were not heard.
Okay, then why did you resign the presidency on August the 9th of 1974?
There were people coming forth that were telling a lot of information that was incredibly damning toward me. A lot of it were lies, but sadly some of it was true. The FBI had turned some of the break-in men. They were prepared to testify against me in order to save their own butts. I felt that the people were turning against me. The polls were lousy. They came to me and informed me that they only had 15 votes in the Senate to stop impeachment, where they needed 34 to stop it. I really felt that to continue to fight was just a total mistake. I know that I had tried to do things to cover up what had happened. It is always the case that the cover-up is worse than, in many instances, the crime. I really knew nothing about it in advance, and if I had just stuck to that story, let the chips fall where they may, I'm sure that I would have been able to complete my presidency.
Did you feel at the time that you deserved to be impeached?
No, I did not, but the circumstances were ganging up against me. I was at a point that nobody was believing what I was saying, and I just felt that I didn't want to create more embarrassment for my family, and I did not want to split the country apart any further than what was happening.
Okay, you were never indicted for any crime, so why did you think that you should have a pardon from President Ford?
I truly had not been indicted, and I felt that I was innocent of any crimes. But I also felt that they weren't going to stop. The newspapers were like a dog on a bone. There were many politicians that truly hated me, and I felt that in the future, I could have been brought up on charges. I think I could have beaten them in the long run, but I was not in a financial position that I could truly fight, cover all the legal fees that I needed. After Watergate, the government reduced the amount of funds that I had access to, being an ex-president. I felt that if I could obtain a complete pardon, that it would stop the individuals in the future from trying to have me arrested, and I simply didn't have the means to defend myself in the legal matters.
Okay, another quick question from one of our listeners. Is Kissinger involved with aliens or their technology?
Henry was aware of the alien presence. I think there might have been a time that he had had discussions with them. But at that time, we were trying to keep all the alien information a secret. We felt that the people just simply weren't ready to know everything that we knew about them.
Okay. You created the Endangered Species Act, the Environmental Protection Agency, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and the National Environmental Policy Act. Did you consider yourself an environmentalist?
No, I never considered myself an environmentalist. These were the days that there was a lot of pressure. People were starting to understand that global warming could be a problem. They felt that the environment needed to be protected. It was the start of a huge worldwide movement of environmentalists. Some of the things I thought were actually acts that were needed. OSHA, I felt was truly needed. There was a lot of mining disasters going on in our country. The workmen really were poorly protected by the law in many instances. I felt that there were many things that needed corrected, but I did not feel that any of these were my true priorities. As I said at the time, we were fighting inflation, unemployment, wars, but I am happy that I was successful in getting those acts passed. It was truly a beginning for what I think helped to create a greener and better America.
What do you consider your greatest achievement in your life as Richard Nixon?
I think my greatest achievement was avoiding World War and opening up channels to countries that represented great threats to us. I kept the Soviet Union at bay. I opened the door to China. I think that my greatest achievements of my presidency came in foreign policy.
What is your opinion of the lack of cooperation in our current government?
I think it's hugely destructive. This is a time that your government has to work together. You are faced with as many problems as I was faced with. You have China. You have the problems of hatred in the Middle East. You have Iran on the edge of having an atomic weapon. You got many, many problems out there. And every time that Congress cannot agree on something for the betterment of the country, these countries that hate you are advancing. You need individuals that will work together. You need people that understand what is taking place in the world. And you need people that just simply will do what's best for the people of our country.
I totally agree with you on that. Who do you consider the greatest challenge to the free world today?
China. China has the manpower, they have the brains, and they have the potential of being able to overcome the United States. As long as the United States relies upon China for things such as computer chips, drugs, other items that are imported at cheap prices, China succeeded in eliminating many of the businesses in the United States. They've been highly successful, and it's going to take long-term planning, endurance, and confidence in the American people to beat them.
Okay, do you have a final message for us, Mr. President?
Yes. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I think that in many instances, my time as president was misunderstood. I made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. I did my best, and I think I did many things that actually helped our country. I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity tonight to speak a bit about them. I had many long-term policies put in. OSHA is a big deal currently. Many of the other environmental things that I started. I actually tried to do some things with Medicare. I tried to do things with long-term insurance. There are many things that I tried to do. My stupidity in certain areas built up great resentment among our political opponents, and that prevented me from doing many things. We lost majorities in the House and the Senate, and when that happens, it's a kiss of death for any administration. I hope that people truly understand that I did love our country. I know when somebody mentions my name, the thing comes up as the big word is Watergate. I admit I handled it very poorly. There are many things that I could have done differently, and I didn't do it. Sadly, that will probably be the word that follows my administration through history. I do think history is going to show that I was not that bad a president. So I thank you for allowing me to come through today. I thank you for allowing me to defend myself. I thank you for allowing me to do confession in certain areas. I do admit that I made mistakes. And I understand that many people don't think a whole lot about my successes, but just simply think about my failures and the fact that I had to resign. So thank you for allowing me to come through. I appreciate the time. If you would ever wish me to speak again, I would be happy to do it.
Thank you so much, President Nixon. I've enjoyed this very much. You're a good soul.
Okay. All right, guys. Next week is Easter Sunday. We are going to do something very special for Easter Sunday. We're going to speak to 3 different Holy Spirits that were present at the crucifixion and resurrection. We're going to speak with Mary Magdalene that was present at the crucifixion. We're going to speak to St. Paul that was one of the first to see him after the resurrection. And then we're going to finish up with a message channeled from Jesus. Join us next Sunday. I guarantee you that it is going to be a very memorable event for you. You can submit questions or recommendations for future shows in advance through our email, channelinghistory@gmail.com. It's very difficult for us to work long lists of questions in during the show. So send them to in advance and we can work them in and do a better job with them. Next week, as I said, is going to be very, very special. Join us. I think that you will be very pleased that you do it. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Thank you for listening. Please join us Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the PowerX Radio Network.
And I would also like to thank you all for joining us. God bless you all. Have a wonderful week.
History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.